Before, didn't they? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine.
If you had a relative already living here, that would, I guess, sponsor you. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but
Yeah.
sponsor you to come. Is that still something that could happen with somebody who's applying for asylum?
Yeah. So the U.S. immigration system is has kind of as its top priority what they call family reunification, which is to say, if there's someone in the United States that has either citizenship or a green card, they're allowed to petition or to what was the word you used? You said sponsor. Yeah, sponsor. Yeah, petition, or you can call it sponsor. Certain family members, depending on their relationship, to come here, and that's independent of, separate from asylum.
Okay.
But someone who's coming for asylum or thinks they want to apply for asylum, they need to also explore all possible routes for getting status here or staying here. And that's something that, a good immigration lawyer knows how to work through all the different possibilities. Like, do you have certain qualifying relationships with family members here, or even stuff that can date back 20 or 30 years. If you're from El Salvador and you had a parent that was here that was part of this, this lawsuit settlement they had, the point is there's lots of little wrinkles that may, work in your favor. And you got to consider, I encourage people to work with someone who knows how to consider all of those different things.
Alternatives, yeah, for sure. And, I think there's so much that we don't know. And a lot of it is just, hearsay and speculation about what we hear people going through and the process that they go through. But, like, for example, I've always thought, or at least I've always heard, here goes, I always heard, siempre dicen, that, like, for example, Mexico, like, nobody from Mexico can ever apply for asylum. Even though there was so much, crime, and there was a lot of people involved with, being threatened by carteles, or, stuff like that, and it wouldn't apply to them. So that's like one of the things that I've always heard. I mean, is that true?
No, it's possible. Mexicans can get asylum.
Wow.
It's tough.
Yes.
I mean, in general, at kind of the first level, if someone's in the country and they apply for asylum, and they go to the office I used to work at, the asylum office, the last statistics that I saw on this that were maybe from last year, it was like in the 40 percentile range that nationwide, that the asylum office said, yes, we'll give you asylum to people.
Okay.
Mexican claims would probably be lower than that. Okay. Because I mean, there's various reasons for it, but one of them is that the kind of harm that they're afraid of, as we discussed in the Northern Triangle, with the Northern Triangle countries, doesn't usually qualify you for asylum. Okay. Because it's gang related or cartel related violence that often doesn't. However, like I said earlier, that it's very case specific, and it depends on the person's actual circumstances, because sometimes, when I was an asylum officer, you would see a person that at first it looked like, that's one of those cases where they're just afraid of the gang, but then it turns out that maybe the gang was more so targeting them because of like a family relationship that they have, like to get back at the person's dad, we're going to go after the son. And then sometimes that can qualify you for asylum, because family relationships can sometimes count as one of those 5 grounds I talked about, the one that's called membership in a particular social group. Sometimes your family relationships can count as that. And that's one of the things, unfortunately, that the government tried to sort of get rid of about a year or so ago, or 2 years ago, but it didn't do so entirely. So it always kind of depends on the exact circumstances of a person's case.
So it's always good to look at all your options.
Definitely.
To make sure that you definitely, if you're considering, or you have a family member that is considering, make sure that you come and talk to Brian, because he obviously knows all the ins and outs and all the information that you need to have.
But it sounds like really what the government's doing is they're trying to have less due process, make everything expedited, quicker, from the beginning to the end, where a lot of people are not going to know that they should hire an attorney. They may not feel like they even have that opportunity. There's no way that most people are going to know all of this information. It's just a lot of information, and they probably know a lot of things that are not even true. Like we hear, like you said, we hear all sorts of things. So that's what's going on, is like they're making it harder and harder, I think, to get a fair shake at it.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, it's completely intentional. It's well calculated and thought out, and it's pretty effective in terms of just making it really, really hard.
Okay, I have one more question.
Yep.
I just need I just want to get clarification, okay? Because this is the number one thing that, excuse me, we hear people, say, whenever they're going through the immigration process, trying to get a green card, or trying to petition a family member, and during the process, a lot of the people get taken advantage of because they go and pay somebody who works at the immigration office and is able to speed up the process. Is that even possible?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Well, let me rephrase that. For certain kinds of visas, I think just business related visas, where someone like you're an employer in the U.S. is trying to get someone a visa or status, there are certain times that you can pay extra for expedited processing, but you do that through like a formal petition, a form that you fill out and submit to USCIS. You don't pay cash to someone. You don't PayPal it to someone's email address. You do that through like the formal application process to the government. There's no expediting other family cases. There's no expediting. Well, there is expediting asylum cases, but not by paying. It's if you have emergency circumstances. Sometimes you can ask if they will kind of speed up your interview, and sometimes they will. But no, you can't pay someone at the office or a notario or a lawyer or whatever to speed up your case.
And people are so desperate. We've had family get into a bad situation where they're so desperate that they make bad decisions about doing, thinking that somehow they can.
They pay for hope.
Exactly. That's
They
true.
pay for hope. They want to hear hope. And if somebody gives them that hope, they don't care. It can cost them $10,000 out of their pocket for hope, because that's all it is. It's just they get the answer that they're seeking, even though it's not true. But they're giving them just hope that it might happen, and it's not true. And it's just people taking advantage of other people because of the situation that they're in.
Yeah, it happens all the time. It's you're talking about people that are often, as you said, in very difficult circumstances. They might fear having their life just torn apart by being deported any day now, or just have uncertainty about the future, and so they're often desperate. Oftentimes language is an issue. It's hard to get through all this complicated immigration laws and rules and policies in English, let alone in a second language, if it's your second language. So and there's a lot of people who take advantage of that. There are a lot of both notarios and fixers, but also a lot of shady immigration lawyers. And I saw this when I was with the asylum office. I saw it all the time, that there were immigration lawyers who would take a lot of money for a case and then do virtually nothing. They wouldn't, they would submit an asylum case and not even like try to explain in like a brief or a letter or a summary of the case, like, hey, here's why the person should get asylum. Here's why they're qualified. Like, they didn't even do that. They just helped the person fill out the asylum application and maybe coached them on how to like write a little statement about what happened to them. But like, it was a shame. It was, and you see lawyers do get, and other people do get caught doing this and go to jail with some frequency for doing this sort of thing.
But I think, one thing you mentioned earlier is, immigration's it sounds like a niche of its own, but really there are niches inside of it. And just this one niche, the asylum niche, is very detailed and has a lot of ins and outs, and as Ida said, is constantly changing. So I would imagine, having a very good handle and knowledge and updated knowledge, it's not something you can just sit back and do and with paperwork. It takes more than that. And so I'd also mention that as far as immigration lawyers, there's a lot of them that are just paper pushers, and that's what they do. They push papers. But really there's so much more of a need for somebody that knows how to do the interviews, knows how to go to court, if there's a hearing. All those kind of things are so critical, I think, in the scheme of things. I do want to ask you this. Unaccompanied minors and family separations. There's been a lot of talk about it in the news. Texas has, I think, these, I don't know if they're called camps, but they have these places set up where there's kids just separated from their families.
Yep.
So that is so does that have anything to do with the asylum, or what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So very often it does. So when families come together and they cross the border, or they present themselves at like the border checkpoint and they say, hey, we want asylum. Well, our government has to decide, well, what do we do with these people? Do we keep this family together? Do we separate them? Where do we keep them? What do we do with them? And there was a period.
So scary.
Yeah, I mean, there was a period, you'll recall, a couple of years or so ago, where, as a deterrent, as a way to try to get people to stop coming, our government said, we're going to separate families. We're going to take the kids away, and we're going to hold them separately from the parents. And the kids were getting put, and still often do get put, into kind of like a foster care type setting, or sometimes with actual families, sometimes in sort of more like a foster home type thing, or like a facility. It's not usually as bad as a real detention facility, like where the parents are, but that's been largely stopped due to people suing over it, because it was just egregious. It was just terrible, but I mean, the system does still end up separating families, and it's scary, and it's difficult, but it just shows you how desperate people have to be to take that risk to travel from their home, to go across some dangerous countries sometimes, facing uncertain conditions, and facing, who knows what once they get to the United States these days. It shows you they're coming from very difficult circumstances. And, that's the thing that, with my experience at the asylum office, people tend to believe, Central Americans, especially, like their stories are usually very believable. We hear all this talk from the administration about, oh, it's fraud. There's so much asylum fraud. And there is a lot of fraud. There is a lot of asylum fraud. But my personal opinion, and I think it's shared by a lot of the other asylum officers that I used to work with, is that these types of cases from Latin America especially are more often than not the fraud cases. These are compelling stories that make sense, and they just show you that these people are coming from some very, very difficult circumstances. And that's what, it's clear if you read the newspapers, or if you do research into the country conditions of the places from which these people are coming, things are bad. I mean, El Salvador, a couple of years ago had the highest, murder rate in the world, like outside of an active war zone. I mean, it's rough.
Yeah, that is so scary, and it's true. I mean, for these people to come and cross so many borders, to try to find a better future for their families, and just safety for all of them, just to be able to live and work, and just, just have a proper place to live. And, all the hurdles that they have to go through to get here, and then they get here, and, and I don't know, it's just so sad to hear all the stories.
It seems so un-American, really. It really is. Everything that's going on here, to me, is un-American. Yeah, and it's very offensive to me. This may be a dumb question from somebody who doesn't know, but what exactly is the difference between TPS, the temporary protected status, and an asylum?
So temporary status, protected status, TPS, is when our government says, okay, people who are here from a certain country that has gone through something really, really difficult, and we don't want to make them go back there, we'll let you stay for a little while, but it's temporary. So like Haiti after the earthquake, for example, they get to people that are here from Haiti. We're saying, okay, we're basically agreeing not to deport you for a while, at least. But that can end, and it does end. It has, like, when our government says, okay, we're giving you TPS status, it has an end date to it. Sometimes they'll renew it and start the program over,
which they just did recently, right?
For certain in certain circumstances. So but it doesn't. Asylum is where you said, hey, I have a good reason to fear being persecuted. There's a good chance that I'm going to be persecuted because of one of these 5 things, these 5 grounds, these characteristics that I have, or that someone thinks that I have. And you get to stay, and you can stay permanently on that. TPS, though, you don't really have to prove anything that you face particular hardship, or that something has or will happen to you. It's just basically by virtue of being from that country, like, oh, my country has been ravaged by this earthquake, or this natural disaster, whatever the case may be. And so therefore I get to stay for a while.
Okay.
So if you had somebody like from El Salvador, which I believe is, or Honduras, which I think is TPS eligible, right? Or I mean, at least they were at some point. Would you apply for both at the same time, like TPS and asylum? Or is that?
Yeah, if you're from a country that is eligible for TPS, that makes you eligible for TPS protection, then yeah, you could apply for asylum or any other immigration benefit at the same time. And you would usually want to, right? I mean, if you have an immigration status that is temporary, but you think you might be eligible for one that is, permanent, then yeah, you should. So people that come here on a valid tourist visa or and are still in their kind of authorized period of stay, meaning like their entry hasn't expired, their time here hasn't expired, or if they come as a student, then but they think they may qualify for asylum, then yeah, they should do it. Or if they qualify for a green card through a family relationship, then yeah, you should do it. You should go for the best thing, the thing that gives you the most benefits and is permanent, is ideal.
Right. So basically, whenever they come on with like a what do you call it? A
visa.
Visa where they're just visiting. Was it visitors visa?
Yeah,
or what?
tourist visa, visitor
Tourist
visa. Yep.
Yeah, tourist visa. You hear a lot of people overstaying that tourist visa. And so instead of doing that, it sounds like it's better to, if you're planning or if you're wanting to stay here longer, just do it before that expires. Like start a process to try to stay here or find a more permanent stay here than letting your, tourist
your
visa
status
expire. Do it before.
Yeah, it's always best to figure out your situation and say, what might I be eligible for, to do that before your current status ends, because the day that your status ends, you technically could be deported. I mean, it's usually not going to happen right away, but if you get stopped for a traffic ticket or something like that, it's possible that the government could deport you if your status has expired. Now, if you have an application pending, if say I come on a tourist visa and when I come through the airport or the border, the officer stamps my passport and it says, okay, you have 6 months to stay, which is usually what you get on a tourist visa. At 5 months, if I apply for asylum, then say I don't have my hearing for a couple months, my interview, and my tourist status expires, you're technically out of status. But generally speaking, the government doesn't usually deport people, even if they come across, even if you come to their attention, they usually aren't going to deport someone who has an asylum application that they've already submitted that's in the works.
Okay. Yeah. That's good to know. Well,
let me mention one more important thing about asylum, is that regarding asylum, that generally speaking, you're supposed to file your application for asylum during your first year in the United States, meaning within a year's time of coming here, you're supposed to submit your application. And if you don't, it could be a reason for them to reject it or to not give you asylum.
Wow.
However, there are exceptions to that.
Okay.
And like if something in your life, there's certain circumstances that make it like really hard on you to to function. If you're in like deep depression, if you're in the hospital for months or something like that, things like that can basically serve as an excuse. And the officer will say, okay, well, that's kind of an excuse for a while. Did you, within a reasonable amount of time after that, go ahead and submit your application? So, and there's another kind of set of circumstances that can excuse a late filing. So, but it's something to keep in mind, is that if you want to apply for asylum, it's definitely best to do it within your first year. However, if more than a year has passed, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be blocked. You might qualify for an exception. That's pretty complicated stuff sometimes that an immigration lawyer can help you work through.
That's awesome. And definitely talk to someone that really knows their stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've learned so much today. It's been asylum is pretty interesting. It is
to me. Yeah, I love it.
Challenging.
Yeah,
and it helps a lot of people.
I love it. I'm passionate about it. It's
you can tell. I mean, you know what you're talking about, and it's you hear the passion when you're explaining all the and giving all this information. It's really good information. A lot of it, we're unaware of. Why? Because we're not. That's not, you know, usually what we deal with the cases that we deal with. But I mean, my gosh, you really know your stuff. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
too. Very good.
I'm so glad that we know you.
Thank you. I'm glad to know you too,
Yeah.
both of you.
Let's see how he does on our lightning round.
Ooh,
boy.
yes.
Okay.
Here we go.
Have you studied? All right. So tell me, if you could have a superhero power, what would it be?
If I could have one, man, probably flying. Yeah, flying.
Flying.
Yeah, flying would be pretty cool. I'd like that
Awesome.
too. All right. So, can you tell us something about asylum in a British accent?
You're right. It's like if you want to seek asylum, it's really just a matter of coming over to the United States, right, and lodging your application with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, right? Only you've got to be careful whilst you do it because, you know, there's lots of pitfalls, right? So you could end up in some bad trouble, right? If you're not careful, right? And I guess the British say right a lot in my mind. I said that like 25 times in 2 sentences.
Cheerio.
Now, how many languages do you speak? Because you've been all over the
Wow,
world.
that was amazing.
Yeah, British is
That
one of
was
them.
so natural. I mean, I really gotta think about that
Thank you.
one.
That was one of my talents kind of growing up was I'm good at accents.
That's awesome.
Not good at much else, but accents.
That was so
Accents and like
impressive.
immigration
Really
law.
good.
That was so much fun.
So you speak British,
You speak British, yeah.
And,
you
Speak British.
speak English.
and so Spanish
Spanish.
pretty fluently right now. And then in the past, I have spoken at varying levels of fluency, Russian, Croatian, and Bulgarian.
Wow, that's impressive. That is impressive.
All three of those though are similar. They're Slavic languages.
Mm-hmm.
So like once I learned one, the other ones were a lot easier to learn. But Spanish was the first Romance language that I studied. I never took it at all in like high school or university, but for my job before going to Chile, I got to study it as like my full-time job for 6 months up in a language school that our diplomats get to go to up by Washington D.C. So it's a great opportunity to get to
Wow.
learn,
So
to get
cool.
paid to learn foreign languages.
And a foreign language.
Yeah, it's cool.
How awesome.
So you travel the world. If there's a country that maybe people don't think about going to visit, you think what we should think about putting on our bucket list, what would that be?
Man, I'll say Chile, which is pretty popular, but at least in the United States, it doesn't seem to be at the top of people's list. But I got to tell you, down in the South, in Patagonia, right? Like which is named the clothing company Patagonia is named after this area that spans both Chile and Argentina. It's amazing. It's like trip of a lifetime experience. The landscape is just like bizarre. The weather's crazy. It's like beautiful and like austere. It's cool. It's really nice.
Well, that's awesome.
Well,
Well, thank you so much, Brian, for coming on today.
My
It was
pleasure.
great having you. I learned so
awesome.
much, and it was just
Yes.
amazing. We're talking about immigration, but we're just talking about one part of the immigration, and it's so much pitfall, so many challenges in it, and it was a great discussion.
This was
Thank you.
great.
Thank you.
This
Yeah,
was
I had
great.
fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And I cannot wait to see, your success and just helping
I
people.
hope so. Thank you.
And, so if you have any questions that have to do with immigration, especially asylum, this is your guy. This is the person that you want to call, okay?
And we'll be putting the phone
Thank you.
number on here,
Yes,
and you'll
we'll
be
put all
having
your
it.
information on
Yeah,
there.
or call us if you need to. We'll give you his phone number as well.
for sure.
It's very exciting.
And don't forget to come by and try tacos del Julio.
Oh, let me tell you what, that
Oh.
was good. I did good today.
My last one, I got to eat this.
Yeah.
Last time I only had 2 tacos. They got made fun of me, but today,
He ate all of them, so we gotta be proud of him. I ate everything too
Let me see
on
the
my
to-go.
plate. Let me tell you about the prices though, because look, Brian, you had how many tacos? 4?
tacos del
4 or 5.
Julio.
4 or 5. Don had 4. I had 4. And there was 2 quesadillas, and we got 3 drinks. And let me tell you that I paid all that with $20, and I got change back.
Yeah, it was a
So,
lot of food.
You cannot beat that, okay? So come and check it out.
Breakfast.
They have
Ooh, nice.
They
breakfast,
have
too.
breakfast. They have
That sounds good.
specials.
Yeah, so bring the family because
Kids menu.
this is a restaurant, sit down, dinner, lunch, or breakfast, and everything looks really good. This family is from Monterrey.
Very friendly
and
people.
They're super nice, and the food is just delicious.
All right.
Delicioso.
That was very good.
All right, thank you so much,
Bueno,
guys.
later.
hasta
Bye,
la próxima.
everybody.
Chao.
Hasta la próxima. Bye-bye.
Chao, chao.